Hello, hello. My name is Shalana Battles. I am indie author of 3 books, and today we're going to talk a little bit about turning notes into your first draft. Turning notes into your first draft is something that somebody commented on my author Facebook page. But I love that idea. I think it's really a fun thing to talk about and hopefully a conversation we can continue to have. Especially because one of my main goals is to help writers who are just starting out. Maybe they have one book done or a draft done, or maybe they haven't published anything, because that was definitely one of the more difficult phases of self-publishing for me, and I had a lot of questions and not a lot of people to ask, and so hopefully I can help and be that person for you. In my opinion, and all of this is my opinion, you can definitely do things differently than here, and I do want to make that really clear, because that is one thing as new writers and new authors. And you'll hear very seasoned authors say the same thing, and that is that new authors will hear something or hear a piece of advice or hear like, oh, you should be doing it this way, and then we'll try to do all the things. And you can't do all the things. And so hopefully this helps you and gives you a starting point or gives you things to think about. If you follow this to the letter and it works for you, that's awesome. But I do want to just say, like, this is my opinion. And it may or may not work for you. I really hope it does. And if you have like follow-up questions about this stuff, please reach out to me. I would love to talk with you about it. So in my opinion, if you have notes or even an idea for a story and you want to know, okay, how do I get that to my very first draft? How do I complete a draft? I think the very first thing you need to figure out about yourself is, are you a planner or are you a discovery writer? Because those are very different things. And the only real way to kind of know that is to start writing. But you can also look at other areas in your life as well. So I know I am a discovery writer. You will hear me say all the time that I can have like a very vague idea for a story, and I'll sit down and the characters do what they want. So the scenes that I come up with, the story as a whole and how it ends up, like none of that is planned beforehand. I just sit down and I write what comes to me, when it comes to me, and I discover things along the way. I might have a scene in mind, and this has happened to me before, where I'm like, I'm gonna sit down and write this scene, and I start writing it, and then suddenly a character I didn't plan for walks in, or something unexpected happens, and so I get surprised a lot of times when I'm writing. The flip side of that is, so that's a discovery writer. You'll also hear in like the NaNoWriMo world, which is the writing competition where you write 50,000 words in a month. They call it pantsers. So you're like flying by the seat of your pants. The flip side of that is you're a planner. So I would look for areas in your life as well. Like, are you a person who plans things out, who makes lists, who is very kind of calculated in how you do your job, or how you are as a parent, or how you run your other hobbies, or whatever the case may be. But it could change. When you sit down to actually write your first draft, you may think you're one or the other, and you end up being the opposite. And so that is my very first piece of turning notes into a draft, is you have to know what type of writer you are, because that is going to directly influence how you take notes and turn it into a first draft. So if you are a planner and you have an idea for a story, your very first step is going to be taking your notes and turning them into an outline. And so outlines can be as detailed as you want, or as kind of vague as you want. It could be 1 page of bullet points. It could be 5 very thought out pages. So however you want to do an outline. There is a really good one. Let me look it up. So it's called Save the Cat, and it is a really good method. It's one I've tried before, but like I said, I'm a discovery writer to my core, so it's nothing that I've like stuck with or anything like that. I've just looked into it. But if you are a planner, I would recommend looking into Save the Cat, because it really does kind of break down the steps really nicely in an outline if you're going to go that route. So I would take your notes, I would use the Save the Cat method or another outline method and write an outline. I want to tell you to be cautious. I want to warn you not to spend so much time on your outline that you never write a book. I am a part of a lot of writing groups and follow a lot of authors and potential authors on various social media platforms. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people say, I've been outlining this book for X amount of years. I've been outlining this book for 3 years. I've been outlining this book for 5 years. I have an outline of this book that's 10 pages long that I've been working on for 6 months. Like, the outline is not the book. And that's what I'm stressing to you. An outline is good for people who are planners, and if you need that, utilize it. But it is not your manuscript. It is not your draft. There is, in, again, my opinion, 0 reason why you should be spending years or even months on an outline. If you listen to some of JF Penn's stuff, she talks about this as well. Talks about looking for reasons why you're not doing something. So if you're spending months and months and months and months on an outline, you need to take a step back and reflect on yourself and figure out what is stopping you from writing the book. What is stopping you from moving from the outline to the draft. Because it may be a project that you're not going to finish. And if it is, or there's something you can overcome and tackle so that you can write the manuscript, do that, so that you're not just spending months and years of your life on an outline and you never get to the draft phase. Like I said, I've seen it a lot. I've seen so many writers post about their outline. Your outline does not need to be perfect. Your outline's not going to be published. No one but you is even going to see your outline. And so do not think, oh, it has to be perfection, or I have to have every chapter fleshed out. Like, no, flesh it out in your first draft. Outline your book. That's why I said, again, look at the Save the Cat method. It'll hit on what you need. The rest of it can wait until you're writing. And so that's my kind of warning when it comes to outlines, is they're not your book. Don't spend eons trying to get the perfect outline. So if you're a planner, you've got notes, take those notes, turn them into an outline, and then turn that outline into a draft. And for planners, this is going to vary on how you do it. You might follow the outline from start to finish and very seamlessly have your draft. You might pick parts of the outline or a specific chapter that you want to work on and then go back and work on those other sections. So that's going to look different to you. But that's kind of the steps. You're going to have your notes as a planner. Those are going to move into an outline. Your outline's going to move into your first draft. It's okay if your first draft isn't perfect. That's another common one that I see, and it's a first draft. You know what I mean? No one's gonna see it. You're not publishing that. Once you have that first draft, what I do is I print it and I do line edits hard copy with a highlighter and a pen, and then I fix those, and then I'm giving it to like an alpha reader or beta reader or whatever. I call them beta readers. to look at that point. So get the draft done. You will hear this a lot too. You can edit a bad page, you can't edit a blank page. So that's that. Now, flipping over to my discovery writers who are like me, the process is similar, but without the outline. So if you have notes or an idea for a story, what I do as a discovery writer is I go from having my idea or having my notes into scenes. So I'm not writing an outline at all for anything. I'm sitting down, and if I have a scene pictured in my head, so let's take Encampment is a good example. When I started Encampment, I had an idea that I wanted to write about a witch who was high school aged. I thought the book would be about her in high school. So that's what I sat down to write. And I started writing the scene of her being in a high school parking lot with her friend. And then all of a sudden she's getting kidnapped and Encampment totally goes off the rails, and now it's a completely different book. But my point is, whatever scene is strong in your mind, the one you're picturing, the one that is kind of formulating your idea, that's the one you sit down to write. It doesn't matter if it's the beginning of the story, the middle, or the end. Sit down and write it, and then write the next scene, and then write the next scene. And so what you're gonna have is a document with chunks of scenes. And so right now I'm working on the rest of the Grand Mesa Men series. The second book in that series, the scene that I pictured was they were on a co-ed softball team. So that's the first scene I wrote for that book. And then another scene that stood out to me, I wrote that. And then another scene that stood out to me, I wrote that. And so once you get through all of those chunks, all of those pieces, you're gonna have to do transitions. So this is where you're moving stuff around. So you have all of these scenes now. You've got to connect them. You've got to create a story. So what I do first is I put my scenes in chronological order. I know, like, okay, this is going to happen before this happens. This is happening after. So I copy and paste and make all of that go together. It's still not going to make sense because I have chunks of scenes and no transition from one thing to the next. But I get it in chronological order. And then I can very quickly say, okay, for this to happen, this has to happen first. And I can fill in those transitions, right? Or to say, okay, right after this, like the baseball scene. Okay, I have them playing baseball, but then my next scene is her at work. So I need to figure out, okay, how do we wrap up this baseball scene? Get them home. Now it's the next morning. You can see what has to be filled in to connect all of the pieces and all the parts. And you're going to be missing some scenes because not everything is going to inspire you enough to sit down and have you write a scene about it. So there's going to be parts where it's like, okay, I need this to happen for the plot to make sense, or I need this to happen for this other thing to happen. But once you have like your inspiring scenes, the scenes that really kind of are you're passionate about on the page, and you have those in order, it is really a lot easier to sit down and figure out what's missing, where do you put it, what are the transitions, and all of that stuff. That will become your draft. So once you're done writing your scenes and writing your transitions and connecting those pieces, your first draft is done. And so that's really cool. And oftentimes how it works out for me is I'll have all the scenes, I'll have all the transitions, and then I'll have usually like 1 or 2 chunks in the middle, but I'll have a pretty big chunk at the end. So what I'm usually working on to finish out a draft is the end of my book. After the climax and kind of writing the resolution and writing the ending. And so you might find that you need a beginning or a middle, but that's your first draft. And so you skip the outlining process entirely. Another thing I have done as a discovery writer is when I do get to that point where all of my scenes are done and I've written as many transitions as I can write, there are times where I will write on a piece of paper just paper and pen, what I know needs to happen. And so I'll have, usually I just number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll be, you know, this, and this needs to happen for this book as a whole to be complete. But again, once you have all of your scenes, it's a lot easier to see the big picture when you have those smaller chunks that were your idea to begin with. I know that sounds a little confusing, but if you're a discovery writer and you sit down and do this, it will make a lot more sense as you start writing. And don't underestimate time to think. Sit down, think through a scene, write it out. Things will just come to you. You'll be inspired as you're writing, and kind of just let the story take the reins, and it'll make a lot more sense as you're actually doing the process. So that is my recommendation for people who are trying to go from notes to a first draft. If you have any questions or you want some elaboration on any of this, please reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation with you. And I wish you all the best of luck in completing your first draft. And please let me know in the comments if you're working on something right now, what it is, and if it's your first book. And I wish you all the luck in the world, and hope that you spend this next week writing all the words. Bye!